to okay, just a second. So to start, I will summarize the purpose of the project. CTPL directed our team to analyze the impacts on Connecticut's paid leave trust fund if private plans terminate and transfer the obligation to the authority. This includes estimating additional benefit utilization costs and payroll contributions if some or all private plans terminate, and assessing the extent to which the authority may levy fines for early termination to mitigate the impact on the trust fund. The next slides provides us overview of the findings. Importantly, probably most importantly, private plan employees are only a small fraction, about 2.5% of the total covered population. There are differences between private plan employees and CTPL covered employee characteristics, but they are similar, substantially similar, and to the extent that the migration of private plan employees is unlikely to have a meaningful impact on the fund. Contributions from the private plan employees migrating to the public plan would likely cover their associated expenditures within 1 or 2 years under most assumptions, and CTPL's ability to assess penalties ensures a positive or at least a net neutral outcome if unexpected private plan termination occurs. The ability to levy penalties is important to ensure that the fund does not float, if you will, unexpected claim costs for longer than necessary, and penalties may also deter future private plans from early termination. So now moving on to slide 4, what we have here is an overview of the different CTPL and private plan coverage in total membership, I guess, or ratepayers, if you will, and percentage of the participation. So again, about 2.5% in private plans out of the about 1.6 million total covered. Moving on to the next slide. This slide is just showing the same information basically broken down by industry. So the orange slices, if you will, at the top, stacked on top of the columns, represent the number of private covered individuals. And just to address the question in the chat, we will most certainly provide the materials from this meeting. The next slide, slide 6, is showing the approved claim rates by industry. They're generally falling between 4% on the low end and 5.5%. What this means is this is the percentage in a given year of employees who would have an approved claim from that industry. So what we're showing is an average of about 4.9%, and although you have one industry, 5.5% in the low end, 4%, the range is pretty narrow overall. These claim rates are estimated based off of simulation models conducted off of the American Community Survey data and other simulation data. On the next slide, we have the average claim costs by industry. So, how much would a claim pay out in total by industry group? The varies based on multiple factors, most notably average income earned by workers in that industry. The average claim is about $5,400 across industries. And it is important to note that these are representing claims paid under the CTPL statute and current rates. So this is not reflecting what may be paid currently in a private plan, but if individuals from a private plan moved in to the state system, this is what we would expect those claims would look like the rest of the population from those industries. On the next slide, we have the total plans and the employment covered by industry. This is a table on the left that shows the number of plans in that industry and then the number of employees covered by those plans. And I think the important thing to show here is that business and professional services as an industry category has the most plans, but financial activities as an industry category by far has the most employees covered. Moving on to the next slide, we have the expected annual number of approved claims on this slide, and this is based off of the rates that we shared earlier in the presentation, but how many claims and from which industries. So if the private plan participants were to migrate to the state system in total in a given year, this is how many claims would be produced by that population. About 1,950. The claim rates and costs per 1,000 employees is just a way of showing, again, how these two groups compare. The number of claims per 1,000 employees in private plans is slightly lower at 47.8 compared to 48.7 in the larger CTPL group. However, the average benefit costs for those claims is higher in the private plan group, and I don't think that's a big surprise given where we know most of those individuals are working and the averages wages in the industry. This again is hypothetical. It's really based on expected behavior if private plan employees are migrating into the state system. On the next slide, we have, we're introducing here the scenarios that we ran to evaluate the impact of termination of private plans. We developed scenarios to illustrate the impact if some or all of the plans terminate and covered employees migrate to the CTPL plan. Each scenario is hypothetical for illustrative purposes, and the scenarios were created to demonstrate the extent of the financial risk posed by private plans that terminate early or unexpectedly en masse. It's important to point out some key scenarios for each of the assumptions for each scenario. Existing private plan coverage to employees while in effect will cover qualifying events occurring in the past. So we're talking about only prospective claims migrating to the system. And then moving on, we will overview on slide 12 what the scenarios are that we put together for this analysis. The first scenario is if all private plans terminate, meaning the 40,600 private plan employees who migrate from private to public coverage, that would produce about 1,949 annual claims with an associated cost of 11.3 million and additional annual collections of about 14.1 million. Under scenarios 2 and 3, we're looking at only a portion of the private plans terminating and those employees migrating. So in scenario 2, the self-funded, some about 6,500 employees from self-funded plans, which would generally be larger employers that are able to self-insure. Essentially, that would, we're estimating producing about 336 annual claims. $2 million in costs and collections of about $2.3 million annually. And then the third scenario is the fully funded. So 25 largest fully insured, meaning they're insured through a private carrier, third party, that these plans would terminate, resulting in about 13,900 employees migrating, 669 claims per year, 3.8 million in associated costs, and we would expect about 4.7 million in collections annually. So getting into the more specifics of slide 13 for this all private plans terminate scenario, this is where all the plans would terminate. We sort of hypothetically picked July 1st just as a start date for this. That would be 40,610 private plan employees migrating, producing about 1,950 annual claims. And what we're showing in the tables here is the summary of the impacts. On the left, it's the claim numbers and costs. On the right, it's collections, how much would be due to be collected quarterly from that group. We did factor in a non-compliance rate of 3.5%, which is consistent with earlier non-compliance rate assumptions, meaning that the actual collections would be a little bit lower. And then below that top table on the right side of the slide, there's the annual collection totals, as well as penalties assessed and the penalty money that would be received for non-compliance, really just being hypothetical, not knowing how many, the percentage of penalties that would be paid. We just assumed a 50% non-compliance rate. So moving on to the next slide, slide 14. What we're showing on this slide is in this all private plans terminate scenario, the net effect on the fund under whether penalties are assessed or not. Over about 2-year period, the fund would come back into balance from this group. Now, this is only talking about relative to that small group coming in. The fund solvency itself really is going to be minimal concern, but over the time period that the individuals are migrating over, they're basically the expenses would begin to occur first, and the collections would come later. So the bottom solid line is showing how the balance between the two would catch up by July of 23. The top line, the dashed line, is showing that if penalties were assessed and collected at a 50% non-compliance rate, that the fund would be made whole essentially much more quickly, in about 1 quarter. So we decided on not to run through all 3 scenarios at that same level of detail. Essentially, the all plans terminate scenario is the big one. The other 2 have followed the same pattern, but it's just more minimal given the lower numbers of people and claims involved. The slide on the left, or both of these slides, are just comparing the outcomes over about 2 years. So on the left, we can see if no penalties are assessed, there's a impact to the fund in the short run, and it catches back up over time as collections come in. If penalties are assessed, we'll see on the right side of the slide that picture changes much more quickly. And so moving on to the final slide for our conclusions. Private plan employees are, again, a very small fraction of the total employment population. The size of the private plan population is simply not large enough to significantly impact the fund. But and beyond that, there are differences between the groups, but overall they're very similar. So nothing within the group is so different that it would potentially make an impact due to that difference in characteristics. Contributions from private plan employees are likely to cover the associated expenditures within 2 years. The ability of the authority to assess penalties ensures that a net positive or at least a net neutral outcome could be expected, and that could be brought into balance quickly, more quickly than without the penalties. And those penalties may deter future private plans from abruptly terminating in the future. And with that, happy to answer any questions. I also want to thank Andrea, Aaron, David, Michael, Locke, the CTPL team, and the Finance and Audit Committee and the board for the opportunity to work on this important issue.
Thank you. Questions, comments, feedback, anyone?
I see Molly has her hand up.
Sorry, can't see that. Ah, there you are, Molly. Of course you do.
Yep, fair assessment. Thanks, Rhiannon and Aaron. So I'm going to try and do my questions quickly and efficiently. My first was, it looks like we've got numbers about the expected average claim cost for private plan employees, sort of overall, like here's what your total claim would cost, and that looks like that's a bit higher than current state plan folks. I'm assuming that that's just they're higher income folks, so the average per week is higher rather than like they're taking more time. Is that right?
Yes, that's right, and I think that's the main factor. There may be factor related to the term of employment, but I think for the most part it's the income that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And then similarly, it looks like the expectation is that private plan employees will put in claims at a slightly lower rate than current state plan employees, but their average claim cost is higher. So it doesn't exactly cancel out, but it's kind of mitigating in the overall effect, right?
Yes, and also that there's always a relationship between the total value of the claim and the amount of the contributions. So in addition to the claims being slightly lower, which could mitigate that, it's also the design of the system is to recover or sort of pay for those more expensive claims by slightly higher premiums.
Got it. And so the private plan employees would pay in at a effectively proportionally higher amount per worker because they're higher income in addition to their claims being higher. So that is also mitigating.
Correct.
And then I guess just to confirm, it looked like just to confirm the numbers, it looks like right now we're looking at about 40,000 employees are covered by private plans. Is that the right ballpark?
Yes, I mean that is, the private plan data that was provided to us was from February. So the total number may have changed a little bit. I think it has gone up in terms of the number. Like I think we've seen some new plans come in, but I don't think the numbers have, in terms of the total population, has changed a whole, significantly since that time.
Got it. So we might be looking at more like 50,000, but probably not more like 400,000.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd be surprised if it was at 50,000 at this point, but yeah, but certainly more likely to be at 50,000 than 400,000.
I can jump in on that since I've been approving the plans. We have had a few more since February, but none that are in like that super large category of employers where you're talking about thousands and thousands. You're really still talking about relatively small numbers. So I don't think it has a real impact on the work that Michael and the WADFIG folks have done, because it just more of the same.
Got it. Thanks, Erin. That's helpful. And then I think just to make sure I'm understanding the thinking, particularly in slides 13 and 14, the idea is that penalties for voluntarily early termination might be appropriate because essentially the deal with the private plan is the private plan promises we're not going to pay into the state because we're going to pay out, and effectively kind of they're breaking their promise. And so you have to like reconfigure to get everybody back to even. Is that the basic idea on the penalties?
Yes, and it's, absolutely written in a way and in that allows the authority to exercise that kind of judgment. I would think that, if an employer with a private plan was acting in good faith and having issues that were really beyond their control, I would not expect the authority to say, okay, well, sorry, but we're going to find you 300% of your, quarterly contribution, expected contributions. It would be more like, oh, by the way, we're done, we're leaving unexpectedly without providing notice and, been out of communication, non-responsive, that kind of thing, where the, that I think speaks to the spirit. I don't want to read into what the spirit is, but I think my read of it would be, this is not a mandatory penalty that's going to be assessed to everybody. It's kind of a case by case, and really special cases maybe when that would come into play. But obviously that's up to the determination of you all.
And just as a reminder, so the private plans are approved for 3 years or unless there is a material change. And so we also have a notice obligation put in the private plan policy so that we know if they're planning on renewing or not. But as we've talked about in past meetings, we also want to make sure that we know and the employees know if a private plan is going to be terminating, because there is a fair amount of communication that needs to happen to make sure the employees' transition is seamless. So, an early and unexpected termination is not desirable. So there's a graduated penalty structure in the policies that the board has adopted that helps us try to manage that.
Thanks.
And if I may just add one thought to this part of the discussion, and that is the impact to the to the authority. I guess I would say as a former administrator in government, I would think the difficult part would likely be administrative, especially if you have unexpected private plan termination. If you have even just say one employer that has 3,000 employees or something, and that goes for whatever reason that ends. Those you have 3,000 people, many of them are going to be calling the call center. Many of them are going to be needing assistance and information, or that's a potential administrative burden that could also impact the. I would expect that it's you can handle it, but it's still it would take time away from the regular business.
Thanks. And I have one last question because I know other folks are waiting. It looks like all of this analysis was assuming sort of early termination that is voluntary on the part of the employer, like the employer is choosing to not do the private anymore. Is it actuarially different if a private plan is terminated early because like they've broken their obligations and their permission to operate a private plan is taken away? Like, is a sort of voluntary versus like enforcement type termination, is that actuarially different in its impact?
I would say that it isn't, except for there's a couple of factors. One is that if it's involuntary termination, that's action that's initiated by the authority has a higher penalty rate that could be applied in that case, up to 400%, I believe is the number. That comes into play again only if it's an involuntary action that was initiated by the authority. But ultimately, if a plan is covering the retrospective claims, then I think that there's little difference between whether it was action taken by the plan or action taken by the authority. If all of a sudden you find out that a plan was, they sent in a bogus insurance certificate or something, and there's no one to cover them, and then the authority decides that it will cover those claims. I mean, that's a different story, but I don't expect that would be an issue. I mean, it's just, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Daryl.
Thank you. A couple questions, Michael. When you looked at the associated costs, was it all inclusive of the paid leave and vendor staff, maybe even technology that would be needed for the potential increase in claim activity?
We, certainly considered that. But as far as, it did not appear the volume of claims would, rise to the level that additional staff or technology, sort of longer term changes to the authority's staffing structure or operations would be an issue. I would think, as I mentioned earlier, it's more likely to be a short-term administrative burden, potentially an unexpected inconvenience of additional calls. I mean, important, but given the size of the larger population is just so much bigger that group, we're not anticipating creating enough additional work to require those additional costs in a way that would be that would rise to the level of having to build them into this analysis.
Okay, so status quo on staffing and technology if there was a blip increase based on this type of activity.
That's our
Got it.
expectation. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Michael, for that presentation. Michael, would you please lead the discussion regarding the refund policies?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And good morning, everybody.
Different Michael, sorry.
I was like, oh, I'm not prepared for that.
You sure, Michael?
I'll take a shot at it maybe. But.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I know we have a lot on the agenda today, and I'm kind of sandwiched between two pretty big topics, so I'll try to be brief and provide a high-level overview of the policies we're recommending. But obviously, please let me know if you wish to discuss anything in more depth, or if there's any questions that we can obviously address. On Tuesday afternoon, along with some other materials for this meeting, Amber had shared the drafts of two proposed policies, both concerning the requests for refunds related to contributions made to the authority. One policy related to refunds requested by employees. This is typically going to happen when they have earned more than the Social Security cap in a given calendar year, and perhaps they have two employers, so they didn't stop withholding contributions from their paychecks once they exceeded that cap. So that's one policy. The other policy is for requests from employers. Typically, this would be due to they calculated the amount that was owed incorrectly, or they accidentally double-clicked and paid twice instead of just once. In very broad terms, both policies have a very similar process. Ultimately, the request would begin with the person requesting the refund. In other words, the authority is not going to be seeking these out and initiating the process on our end. It'd be up to the person who has overpaid. Depending on the reason for the overcontribution, there may be certain questions that would be answered or documents that would need to be submitted to the authority. But once those have been received, the authority can review the request, potentially consult other data, for example, any information from other state agencies to kind of validate what we're being told, and ultimately make a determination of whether a refund is owed. And if a refund is owed, the authority would then be able to send the funds back to the requester. That's basically it in a nutshell. Ultimately, our ask here is to have there be a vote to allow us to post these policies for notice and comment, and eventually adopt them to the consolidated policy document. But obviously, before we do any of that, be happy to take any questions, comments, any changes that people think would be appropriate before we post. Happy to talk about that today.
Thank you, Michael. Molly.
My reputation precedes me. So I should.
That's fine, Molly.
Yeah, I had a couple quick questions, and then I can follow up offline. My first is just if you're a self-employed person who has opted in, if you need a refund, that's under the it's more like an employer type refund. Is that right? Like which bucket are you in?
That sounds right to me. I know the finance team is on here. Tell me if I'm totally off on that, but yeah, I'm thinking for if the problem is they over contributed or miscalculated, I'm thinking they use the employer policy.
Got it. That makes sense. And then I guess my other sort of structural question is for the employee refund, it sounds like we're setting up a system where if as an employee you've overpaid, the default is the authority is not letting you know you overpaid, you have to know and then submit the request, or is there any is there like a notice, like is the burden on the employee, I guess?
Yes, I think that's right. Finance team, once again, correct me if I say anything wrong here, but we're limited in the data we have on individual employees, I think. So it's really the employee's gonna have to come to us. We don't track that kind of level of data on the employee level. Everything we're getting is from the employer. So we expect them to initiate the process for us.
Just to jump in on that, really the situation where it's going to be an employee coming to us for a refund rather than talking to their own employer is, as Michael said, when you've got multiple employers. And so each employer may or may not know that their employee has multiple employers. So it's really going to only be the employee who knows at the end of the year that their combined income exceeded the Social Security cap and therefore that their contributions continued past that cap.
Got it. So it sounds like the reason that the authority is not like proactively notifying people they went over is because the authority doesn't know. Like it's not,
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is a good reason to not tell people things you don't know. I guess my last question was just in the listing of sort of kinds of, and I know it's not exclusive, but kinds of information that the authority can use. It's under 4 in the employee refund to determine a refund is owed. It looks like all of these are either government data or employer information. None of it is information submitted by the worker. And I wondered if there was a reason to not list information submitted by the worker. They're like W-2s or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good catch. We're asking them to submit the W-2s along with their pay stubs for the final year, and we will consider that. I can definitely add that to language. I think the intent was other sources we might look at, but I can absolutely make that clear in the language before we post it.
That might just be helpful if those are folks who are filing. But that was all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Molly. Anyone else? Mike.
I just have a quick question following up on one of Molly's questions. Does the Department of Labor know whether employees are employed by more than one employer? I mean, is that information available?
So it is possible, and Daryl, jump in if I'm saying it wrong, or John. The Department of Labor gets reports from the employers about who they have on staff. And so when we look at Department of Labor data pursuant to our MOU authorized by statute, we can see that a particular employee has multiple employers, but we cannot see if that data does not tell us if the employers continue to pay the contributions. So it could be that if I know that my employee has multiple jobs and I worked that out with my employee, that I stopped making contributions as soon as they hit 138. Or, the other employer did as well, then the employee is perfectly fine. The fact that the employee has dual employment does not automatically mean that there's an overpayment. So it really is on the employee as the sort of best source of information on that.
I guess, at least my sense, and maybe Molly's, is that this is going to fall through the cracks. Employees with multiple employers, they're going to continue to make contributions. They're not even going to think about requesting a refund. So is there some sort of notice, maybe not specific notice? Is there something on our website? Somehow, how can we minimize this falling through the cracks and employees overpaying?
So great point. I think one thing we can enhance in our education and outreach is to say, sort of, if you work for multiple employers, you should really pay attention to this, because we do say that the contribution cap is at the 138 or Social Security contribution level as it changes. But we could be more specific and directive and have messaging to, employees who work for multiple employers. You should pay attention to your contributions to make sure that if the total amount exceeds the 138, that look and see if your contribution stopped. And if they didn't, that's when you come to us. I think, at least for now, particularly because our finance team does not have access to the DOL data, only the benefits team has it. We're not going to be in a position, because we limit our DOL access to only on a need-to-know basis. We're very, very strict about that. Just letting Daryl know that we know our rules. So I think for now, at least, the best we can do is just be really clear about what the process is, and maybe try to do some directed messaging so people in that situation are able to be on the lookout. And maybe particularly some messaging around the end of the year, beginning of the fiscal year. Hey, while you're doing your taxes, check to see if you overpaid. That's something we could do. We do just we do know that even with a large number of people who work multiple jobs, many times their combined average does not exceed the Social Security contribution cap. So it's definitely that relatively small number of people who work multiple jobs where they earn enough from both jobs that they're going to be in that six-figure category. So in practice, we don't think it's the largest population that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I'm interested. I would just add I think the messaging approach makes a ton of sense. I would just add also people who change jobs, because there could be people who have who wouldn't see themselves as having multiple jobs, but it's, I had high income job number 1, I hit the cap, I changed jobs to high income job number 2, and don't think about it. And also maybe think about if there's something to talk about in whatever information workers are getting about what they're contributing. But it sounds like the right approach here is an informational approach rather than changing the proposed policies.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion.
Daryl?
Yeah, thank you. No, I agree. And Michael, Aaron's right. I mean, for U.S. Department of Labor and conformity compliance requirements with UI, unemployment insurance data, they're very, very strict. So, we walk a fine line in that data sharing. So Aaron is correct. It is a complicated situation, Mike, that you raise. I mean, there's certainly the ability to create sophisticated queries to potentially identify individuals that might fall into that category. And I do agree, it must be a small population because, just based on the dynamics of the cap in one full-time job, and potentially someone might be working a part-time job, that's got to be a very small percentage just by the dynamics of being, at a high salary working full-time. The other thing that I don't believe is possible is notifying specifically the employee, because I don't believe we capture employee addresses and so forth. The data is coming in through the employer. So I really think that the messaging probably around tax season would be the best component, and then, dealing with that review. And I would imagine that's going to prompt some level of calls for the inquiry on, hey, is this me? And then working through the solution. So great point, Mike. But I think, Aaron, to me, the way Aaron is describing the solution is really the best course at this point, just offering my perspective.
And I think the other thing I would add to that is that the FICA wage is not something that is captured by DOL. So there's no absolute guarantee, we don't have like a fine line in the sand on what that number is. So that's another factor.
No, that sounds like an appropriate way to deal with it, and then we'll assess it next year, what kind of inquiries do we get? Do we get any? So I'm good. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good discussion. Anybody else? Okay, so I'm going to ask for a motion to authorize the staff to post the policies that Michael described in the Connecticut Law Journal for public comment.
Motion, Molly?
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, Justin.
Thank you, Justin. Any additional discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Thanks, everyone. Dave, you are up to review the draft budget for 2022-2023.
Okay, thank you, Fran. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming today. I'm going to share my screen. Okay.
You can see your screen, Dave.
Thank you, Amber, for the confirmation. Appreciate it. All right. Okay, this morning we are going to talk about the proposed budget for the Connecticut Paid Leave Authority for the fiscal year 2022 through 2023. For those of you who might be unaware, the fiscal year is from July 2022 to June 2023, same as the state of Connecticut. And we have three portions of our budget. We have our operating budget for the expenses of the authority. We have our bond budget, which we use for IT systems and the like. And we also have our contribution budget, which budgets the contribution numbers coming in and the benefits and other expenses paid from those contributions. Starting with the operational budget, we are budgeting a total revenue of just over $20 million for the next fiscal year. Most of that is the administrative fee for the Connecticut Paid Leave Authority of $20 million. That's about 4.5% of our budgeted contributions. We also have an amount about $16,000 budgeted for penalties related to fund recovery. Budgeted expenses are just over $17 million for the fiscal year. The significant expense categories for next fiscal year include salaries, fringe, and pension expense. That's $9.1 million. That's for 44 FTEs, employees by the end of the fiscal year. That includes 7 IT positions being added during the year. And we're looking to enhance our IT people as rely less on outside vendors for post-production support and use more of our internal people for that. $1.5 million is budgeted for our contact center of United Way as we continue to use them. $1.9 million is for post-production support of our contribution system as we're still using an outside vendor, Slalom, for that. Outreach and engagement, we are budgeting $1 million for that as we continue efforts to educate employers on their obligations to pay contributions and also educate potential recipients that they could be eligible to receive benefits from the Paid Leave Authority, making sure they're aware of that and they can apply as such. We have $1.2 million budgeted for grievance adjudication. Our partners at DOL are helping us out with that. So we worked with them to come up with an annual budgeted number for that cost. So those significant expenses all rolled up together are about $14.7 million or 86% of the expenses. Just to talk for a minute about the significant assumptions behind the operating budget. Like I mentioned, the administrative fee was $20 million, and that was about 4.5% of budgeted contributions for the year. Fund recovery penalty, we assumed that well, we knew that about 10% would be the penalty fee. And that 5% of those who are non-compliant would be recoverable. And the corresponding expense was budgeted the same way. For expenses, we did consult with OPM and we got some high-level CBAC information that was available at the time. It wasn't finalized yet, but once we get that final information, we'll obviously incorporate it. But for budgetary purposes, we had assumed 2.5% adjustment in July of 2022 and a 3% salary adjustment in 2023. The fringe benefit rate was budgeted at 90%, 25% for healthcare and other benefits, and 65% for pension. Moving on to the bond budget, we are allocating, we are requesting in a budget of $5.7 million for an allocation to be allocated to the authority in the coming fiscal year. That amount would cover the following items. Statutory reporting, we're looking to automate that. Registration updates, including some additional functionality to provide a desired employer experience. Some updates to private plans, not private plans specifically, but updates to collect the data from private plans to make it easier for them to submit their data to us. A claims audit tool, which would help confirm the veracity of claims and minimize any potential fraud from those requests for claims. Fund recovery solution that would address delinquent contributions, including automating payment reminders to those who haven't paid or are late in paying. And also portal replatforming, both for registration and payments. And that would include items like providing additional language support, more analytics and reporting, better functionality, and some additional payment methods. Moving on to the contribution budget. For the coming fiscal year, we have budgeted almost $442 million in contributions after the non-compliance and fund recovery assumptions. The payroll contributions are based on our latest projection, which in turn is based on 1 year of actual history we've had so far, with a 7% annual increase that was assumed by the actuaries in their numbers. Non-compliance is budgeted at 1%, and fund recovery is budgeted at 5%, starting about 3 months after the non-compliance event takes place. Investment income is budgeted at 0.1%. That's the rate we've been earning lately, although we have seen it creep up recently, but we're going to be conservative and budget at that for now. We are also talking to the Office of the Treasurer and seeing if there's any other investment options that the authority can invest in. But before we do that, we're looking to balance our liquidity needs and rate of return, as well as preservation of principal. As far as expenses go, we have budgeted almost $449 million in claims and benefit payments. That's based on our latest actuarial assumptions. We have been making claim payments, but we don't have enough of an actual history yet to use that for budgetary purposes. Our administrative fee for claims and benefits that we pay to AFLAC is budgeted at $25 million. That's based on our contract with them for existing services and any possible future services that we could utilize with them. The administrative fee for the Connecticut paid leave is budgeted at $20 million. That's the same as the operating budget, as we saw before, as it should be. And also, we are budgeting repayments this year of money owed back to the state. Seed repayment that we're currently making now will continue to be made. So that's why we're budgeting almost $1.3 million. That's through October of 2022, when the seed payments that were given to the authority, which was $5.1 million originally, will be and has to be paid in full. And also in this fiscal year, we'll be expected to start repaying back the bond money. So the $1.6 million begins that repayment of the $12.3 million that we currently have outstanding. At the end of the fiscal year, June 30, 2023, our closing balance is expected just to be under $198 million. Now, there is a decrease shown in the contribution budget this year from beginning to end. That's not unexpected. If some of you remember from the actuarial projections that Michael Voorhees shared with us a few months ago, we did see that the balance in the contribution fund would decrease at first for a couple of years and then level off, and then it would increase again. So this isn't entirely expected. We do budget conservatively. But this is based on a lot of this is based on the assumptions from the actuary, and this is where we expect we'll be and why we budget it that way. These are the significant assumptions behind the contribution budget. I actually talked through most of these already, so I won't repeat them, but they're just on the screen for you to review. That is the budget that we're asking to be approved. So at this point, I'm opening up the floor if anybody has any questions.
And we'll go right to Molly.
Thanks. Can we actually look at slide 6?
Of course, Molly.
Thanks. I just want to make sure I think it's there's multiple things that we call admin fees, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding like which things are going to which. So the 25 million, that's what we're paying Aflac.
Correct.
The 20 million is here's all the things that the authority is spending money on for administration that are not Aflac. Is that right?
That is correct, Molly.
Got it. So that basically, just in rough numbers, those two things added together are about 45 million. So roughly we're expecting between Aflac admin and non-Aflac admin to spend basically 10% of what we'd be paying out in claims, like the equivalent of 10% of what we'd be paying out in claims for all told the admin.
Yeah, right. That's certainly how the math works. Yes, you got it. You got it.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful context. And am I, this is probably just me misremembering. My recollection was that we've been paying Aflac a little under 2 million a month, and this looks like this is a little over 2 million a month. Is that right? It's going up a little.
You're not misremembering. That is correct. I'm glad. Thank you for paying attention. That's great. It's nice to know. Yes, but like I mentioned before, there are other potential fees that we could pay to Aflac. Now, that doesn't mean Aflac is just automatically going to start charging us and we go, oh, okay, no problem. No, it doesn't work that way. They have to come to us first. We have to agree to it. Obviously, it has to be in the contract. So we just want to make sure that we allowed for that in the budget if we did pay for anything else. So you're correct. Currently, if we use that actual run rate, it would be lower than that, but we didn't want to box ourselves into a corner in case we had to pay for something else later.
Got it. So we're conservatively budgeting that we might end up paying a little bit more than we're currently paying, which may or may not be what actually happens.
That's correct, Molly.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Anything else? No? Okay. Does anybody else have?
Yeah, I'd like to just jump in. Molly's right in pointing out the comparison, but I think that the true comparison, just to be transparent here, is the admin of 45 mil should be compared to the revenue coming in, payroll contributions, because you could pay out 200 million or 800 million. It's what's coming in is really what you want to focus on. So I just want to make that clarification and make sure that I understand correctly. For fiscal and budgetary purposes, we should be looking at the admin for the program in comparison with the monies that are coming in, not the benefits being paid out. Is that correct, David?
No, that's certainly fair. The numbers are roughly the same, so it's still about, right? I mean, so
They
look,
are,
so right,
coincidentally, they are, yes.
right. So it's still about 10% in total. Like I mentioned at the beginning, the admin fee is about 4.5% of the payroll contributions. So, you know, which is certainly a reasonable percentage in terms of an admin fee. And the AFLAC one is based on our contractual obligation with them. But yes, you are correct, sir. Anybody else?
Dave, this is Isha. I do have a question.
Yes, Isha.
With relation to your planned technology expenditures, I forget what slide that was on. And I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on your definition of replatforming. So are you just extending your existing platform to include new modules for registration and payments as you have here, or are you changing systems?
So I can answer that, Dave, if that's okay.
Of course, Andrea.
All right, so welcome everyone. I have this weird green background because I'm technically on leave, but I do want to answer this question. So good morning, everyone. The replatforming is this: when we built the current system, we did that with our partner Slalom, and it was custom built for us so that we could get it up and ready in really the 5-month period that we had available. So they developed a custom solution for us. But it has limitations because it was definitely the minimum viable product. And so it doesn't allow us to do a number of things, add more languages, and it can be difficult to add content on a quick basis, which we often need to do. It has to be scheduled, it has to be, and you know, we have to kind of do it in a way that's more cumbersome than now. And it's not necessarily in the same, what I call technical ecosystem as the rest of the state's websites. So what we want to do is to move it out of this technical solution that was built just for us for this purpose, just to get it going, and move it into a place, move it into the platform that the state is using, which I hope Lori tells me to get this right, which is Sitecore, which will allow us to leverage all of the other advantages that the other state websites have, which will include language, easier ways for us to add content, remove content, and just to make enhancements in a much easier way than we're doing now, because it works, but it's definitely not as smooth and it can be cumbersome. And the lack of a language addition other than Spanish is problematic for us philosophically, because we serve the entire state and we should have more than one other language other than English that we offer the website in, and that's just not feasible with the platform we have right now. So that's what we mean when we say we want to re-platform. And that will also give us much more flexibility to add more nuance, and to also add more functionality to the registration and payment process, which is just too much minutia for us to go into now. But we can't do that with what we have. But moving into Sitecore will allow us to do that.
No, and thanks for that explanation, Andrea. And I think it's great that the authority is moving in the direction of using enterprise assets, you know, from the state perspective, and there's probably, you know, more that we can look into, and happy to talk to you guys a little bit more about what those options are as the need arises, but happy to hear that.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going
Molly,
back.
thank you. Molly, I think you have your hand up again.
I do. It'll be fast, I promise. It's on this side. So just to confirm, and I think this is me not knowing bond terminology, what you're saying here is let's spend 5.7 million of the 50 million we already borrowed, not let's borrow new money. Is that right?
I'm going to clarify what you said. The authority has been authorized to use $50 million of bond funds borrowed by the state. To date, we've used $12.3 million. That's, well, actually, we've used about 11.3. We've been allocated $12.3 million, and we've used about 11.3 million in very round numbers. Go ahead. Yes, Erin.
Sorry, just to be slightly more precise.
Yes.
The state has not yet borrowed 50 million for us. The authorized is literally legislatively authorized. There was a public act passed that authorized us to have bonds available kind of up to 50 million. Then the bond commission meets and allocates, and then the bonds are actually, they're general obligation bonds. So like, then we get money from a general obligation bond. It's not a bond specifically for us.
Got it. So the state is issuing bonds, not the quasi.
Correct.
The money
Correct.
funnels through to the quasi. Got it. So this is, have we previously budgeted assuming that we would end up using the full 50 million authorized, so it's already sort of baked in, or are we sort of accounting for taking on this new debt that we presumably have to repay to the state?
So far it's been to 12.3 million and we're asking for another 5.7 million. So that would be a total of $18 million that we would ultimately, assuming we used it all, that we would ultimately have to repay back to the state.
Got it. And so again, forgive me. So the thinking here of doing this stuff, which seems really important, out of bond money rather than contribution money, is that just that it's like better because we can pay it off more slowly? Like, what's the thinking on why this should come out of bond money and not contribution money?
So
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Erin.
sorry, generally speaking, this is how the state handles IT capital investments.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Anyone else? All right, I think we're gonna move along. Molly, seriously, your hand is still up. Did you want to say something else? Nope, got it. Thank you. Okay, may I have a motion to adopt the draft budget for implementation for the 2022-2023 fiscal year?
Motion
So
on the
moved.
draft.
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion, anyone? Great job, Dave. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thanks, everyone. We're going to move right along to John for a claims administration update. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. Good morning, everyone. I'll share my screen.
We can see your screen, John.
Thank you. Okay, so as of 5/10, we have taken in 38,852 claims, and the monthly numbers are here before you. The 5,200 in December, the 9,700 in January, the spike, the 6,900 in February, 7,700 in March, 6,800 in April, and through 5/10, we were at 2,347. And that is on par with the actuarial numbers. And then claims by reason, again, by far the employee's own illness or injury at 19,000 total, and followed by bonding and pregnancy, childbirth at 6,200 and 6,000, and then care of a family member. And the other categories here are substantially lower numbers of claims coming in. And then the claims by type, continuous, intermittent, and reduced schedule. Again, the continuous claim filing is substantially higher. Hi, Sal. Any question?
Yeah, I was gonna wait until you finished.
Oh, sure, okay.
This.
And so again, continuous, intermittent, and reduced, the continuous claims by far outweigh the other two categories, and the intermittent is by far the lowest category of claims. And then looking at some demographics as well, the age groupings here. 26 to 41 is the highest number of claims intake at 20,400, followed by age group 42 to 57 at 9,200. And then the third largest being the 58 to 76 age group at almost 6,600. And claims by gender is also almost double the amount of female filers than male filers. And then just looking at the top 10 towns utilization rate. Oh, and I see I've neglected to change. Oh no, that's correct actually, December through April on this slide. So we have the top 10 towns, and we have the population for each town, the total number of claims there, as well as the incidence of claims per 10,000 residents here. So the top 10 towns from Canaan and Hampton and Voluntown, Ansonia, a significant number of more rural locations in there as well.
John, it's Fran. I'm so curious. I'm so curious, and I don't know if we have the capacity to do this. I might have mentioned this earlier in another meeting, but do we have the ability to look at, for these towns, the age group and the gender and the types of claims?
So we could we could probably get age group and gender and expand on this if you would like to do so. The data that we have available to us for the purposes of developing these figures are in a data table that is accessible, that we should be able to slice and dice that data a little more carefully. So I will jot some notes here that you're looking for both gender, and you were also looking for, what was the other item, Fran, please?
Age
and gender. So some more demographic.
and type of claim, if we can. It's more of a curiosity. I'm not sure. I don't want to put more work on your plate, but it's a curiosity to me that these rural towns, more rural towns, I should say, have this high rate of claims. I find it really interesting. So
yeah, and certainly using that on a population basis, we're seeing that pan out that way. But we could certainly do that. I think that's just a matter of taking some of that data and running some pivot tables on it, and we should be able to produce some of that information for you. Okay, and then looking at the approved leave reasons to date, you can see the percentages here. So the own health is running at about 44%. And then if you look at the pregnancy and bonding combined, that's quite a significant percentage at about 46% total. Care of a family member is next, and then these other reasons are also substantially lower. With regard to the pregnancy and bonding, we do have some initiatives that we are undertaking with regard to some website enhancements to provide information on what to expect when filing a claim, and some additional guidance for those claimants to help to process their claims in a more smooth manner, so they get some information up front that they can kind of go through on a self-guided basis. And then the customer care center numbers coming from Aflac, they have experienced some phone issues and are in the process of upgrading their phone system at the end of this month. And they have worked through some issues with their phone system over recent weeks, which has stabilized. However, they are making a major upgrade towards the end of this month, just to provide you some additional context with regard to the change in service level here. I think that concludes the claims presentation. Sally, you had a question?
Yes, I do. I'm pretty, I wasn't gonna say this, but the Canaan numbers means they're hyper aware of the fact that they could use this program, which is, I think, excellent. But in any case, like, my question was, you said there were about 38,852 claims, if I wrote the number down correctly. Can you tell me what percentage were denied?
So those percentages is I do not have at my fingertips. I could certainly provide it to you later, and I'd like to provide you some context with regard to that as well. There were a significant number of COVID claims, as you are probably aware, going back to January and February, which ticked up the overall number of denials as a result of the fact that those types of that type of illness oftentimes did not rise to the level of the definition of serious health condition with regard to the FMLA statutory requirements for serious health condition. As a result, there was a very high percentage of denials. I want to say the denials on those COVID claims were in the vicinity of 86, 87%, and simply because they did not, again, meet the definition of serious health condition. So I'd like to provide you a couple of sets of info, both the overall denial rate and then the separate denial rate once you remove those COVID claims. And I think you'll see that the numbers are certainly a lot more along the lines of what we would have expected without that COVID scenario, with the additional claims and denials resulting from that.
I appreciate that, because the denials did seem almost astronomically high. But that's not where I was really going. My concern is due process. So I was wondering if you can tell me how many of the denials actually got over to the Department of Labor.
I think Aaron probably has some of those numbers, but just to kind of take a step back, with respect to those denials, we do have a reconsideration process that is set up as an automatic form that goes out in the event, excuse me, in the event that one of our claims gets denied. There is a form that goes out with that denial, including the reason for the denial and also what's called a reconsideration form. So we kind of have an internal review process there that the customer can request that internal reconsideration process. And many of those denials have been reviewed and overturned upon review prior to rising to the level of a appeal to Department of Labor.
That'd be good. That's, first of all, it's very helpful to know, and I'm glad that they have that due process piece. So I would be interested in those numbers, and then I would be interested in the appeals that did go after that to the Department of Labor. I know that they're very few, and that's why I have concerns.
So actually, I just looked at the our tracking, because Michael's been handling most of the appeals. We are just rounding up to 100 appeals.
Yeah.
I will say that some of those appeals that come to us are misfiled. There are people who are applying for UI and are confused about how to handle their unemployment insurance appeal, or they have filed appeals with us even though we have no claims, so it's something else. But in terms of actual appeals received, it's just, I think we're at 99. Of the about half that of those that have been actually ruled upon, maybe so far our decisions have all been upheld, or appeals been withdrawn because the applicant filed the appeal simultaneously with the reconsideration process, and so it's been resolved one way or the other. I can point out, I like John, I don't have the actual denial numbers at my fingertips, but I did look at it the other day. An incredibly large number of the denials are because people haven't produced documents. So it's not, so sometimes if they deny because they didn't produce the documents required to substantiate their leave or identity verification, they get the denial, they do a reconsideration, and they provide the documents, and therefore the claim moves on. So it's all good. If they didn't produce the documents, those individuals are very unlikely to file an appeal, because it's not like it's not like an active decision was made. It's you failed to provide the documents needed to substantiate the claim. If they're not going to provide the documents, they're not going to file an appeal. So I think we're actually seeing a pretty reasonable number of appeals given the experience that we're seeing with the claims, but we can get you those more specific data. data points.
Thank you very much.
And sorry, late breaking news, Aaron, I haven't updated the spreadsheet yet. We did get our first reversal of a denial from the,
Okay.
of the Department of Labor. So we have one so far that was not upheld.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
I think Britt Marie has her hand up.
Hi, Britt Marie.
Okay, thank you. So I just had a question about sort of the average response time. Specifically, my understanding is that when someone files a claim, they're assigned to a case manager. And so even if they get a quick response time to their initial call into the customer care center, they may just be able to leave a message for their assigned case manager. Do we have any data on how long it's taking the assigned case manager to respond to specific queries about a claim status?
So response times depend in some respects on the kind of timeline relative to the claim and where it is in the process. The AFLAC has tried to prioritize due dates of decisions and things of that nature with regard to customer service outreach and things of that nature. In addition to that, we do have an internal team at Connecticut Paid Leave. Our benefits team is an internal team that provides TPA oversight and a customer service unit that provides claimant an alternate path for customer service if they're experiencing a problem with their claim. So we've provided what we do in that vein, and we've been doing for the past couple of months is providing comprehensive case reviews to identify case status and make customer service outreach to assist with any outstanding or insufficient documents necessary to process a claim. After review, we would escalate those cases for expedited decisioning and payment to close that customer service loop, follow up with the customer. So with regard to AFLAC's customer care, some of it is driven by kind of what's in the file and what the timeline related to the date of leave and the decision dates on those cases are. So it's not always completely consistent with respect to the amount of time that it takes to get back to a customer. And in some cases could be, up to 5 days or so for return communication, depending upon where that claim is in the process.
Okay, thank you for that, John.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Comments, feedback, questions for John? Thank you so much, John.
Okay, thank you.
Amber, we're going to move on to you, and would you kindly provide us with the registration and contribution portal project and outreach and engagement update?
Sure, thank you, Fran. All right, share my screen. And can you see my screen?
No.
We can see your screen, Amber.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so for the program metrics as of, I want to put this in slideshow. Sorry about that, thank you. So for program metrics as of May 9th, business registration, we had 135,888 businesses registered, which is an increase of 2,493 for this month. 663 TPAs registered, which is an increase of 74 for this month. For contributions, we had 517,623,805 received or in transit. 549 approved private plans, which is an increase of 1 from last month, which is approximately 39,000 Connecticut workers covered by private plans using the Q4 2021 DOL data. The contact us inquiries are 521 open contact us, 670 are new inquiries created this month, 670 inquiries were closed this month, which makes a total of almost 34,444 closed to date since September of 2020. For small business support and benefit teams advisors, there are 58 open cases. 56 cases were created this month, 57 cases were closed this month, and 751 cases have been closed to date since January of 2022. The number of Connecticut workers covered by Connecticut paid leave are 1.6 million. This is using the DOL data for Q4 2021. So Connecticut paid leave portal program for May and June activities for the employer registration and contribution portal. They're currently working on production support. Detailed design for the fund recovery continues. Resource planning is in progress and bond funding is being requested to complete the project. And there's a high level of design for private plan audits in progress. And on the benefits claim administration side, they're working on integrating AFLAC claim and payment data into the CTPL platform. So for CTPL's outreach and engagement updates, website statistics, we had 323,973 users. So 71 of those were new users and 29% are returning. So basically folks that are coming are spending more time and visiting more pages. Of those, we had 804,051 sessions, 2.85 million page views, 3.55 pages per session, and folks are spending about 3.23 minutes per session. So for event updates, we had office hours on May 2nd virtually, and we'll be offering those in the weeks and next month as well. On 5/6, Jessica was at the Connecticut Alliance of Foster and Adopted Families annual conference in person in Groton. On 5/10, we held a webinar for Your Guide to Paid Leave. Yesterday, Andrea was virtually at the Black Health and Wellness Accessing Pathways to Comprehensive Healthcare, which was sponsored by the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. This weekend, Nancy, Jessica, and I will be at the Connecticut Women's Better Living Expo in Bridgeport at the Total Mortgage Arena. June 11th, we'll be at Celebrate West Hartford in person in partnership with the we're covered here, but the Business Collective. And June 23rd, we'll be at the Norwich Sea Unicorns in person. And June 30th, we'll be at the Hartford Yard Goats. For National Partnership for Women and Families, there was a Mother's Day tea centering women in economy. And Fran Pastore, our board chair, sat down with Senator Tammy Duckworth on May 5th to discuss the importance of paid leave and share stories of Connecticut paid leave recipients during their Mother's Day tea event, discussing the policies, practices, and partnerships supporting Mother's Day and economy and mothers in economy. New educational materials. So we're working on a few of these. We'll clearly outline the claims process for Connecticut paid leave applicants, help to draw attention to the order of the various steps and time frame for processing. And we're going to do this by adding new website materials, which are currently in development through short video tutorials that we're actively developing and we'll share on social media. And we do have one of these here. We're going to share this presentation deck with the board afterwards so you can watch any of the videos that we do have embedded here. Andrea was interviewed by Authority Magazine on the Connecticut Paid Family and Medical Leave Insurance Authority on the 5 things you need to be a highly effective leader during turbulent times. So you can read this article online. We do have some new outdoor creatives on our billboards. Submit your claim today. And 3 billboards in rotation between Hartford and New Haven and Fairfield counties, really just kind of focusing on different stages in life. And the paid leave podcast update, episode 6 was released on April 25th on organ donation, and episode 7 was released on May 9th with Representative Jillian Gilchrist and Ann Hughes. We've had a 575 total downloads. The #1 most downloaded episode was Andrea Barton Reeves, and the #2 most downloaded episode was on domestic violence. So Nancy's been doing a fantastic job on these, and you can listen to these here on our Buzzsprout, and there actually is a tab right on the ctpleave.org website now as well. And that is it on updates for outreach and engagement in the contribution portal. Does anyone have
Amber,
any
thank you.
questions?
Questions, feedback, thoughts, anyone? All right, thank you so much, Amber. We're going to move on to Jacqueline for a legislative update.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Fran. Sorry, I'm, of course. What is with me in technology? I really don't know. Okay, there we go. I'm so sorry. I'm really good at it. I normally, sorry. Of course, when I go to share my screen, it's going nuts. So, all right. So now I'm going to share. Let's see. Oh, God. Do you see it?
We can see your screen, Jacqueline.
Yep.
Thank you,
Put
Amber.
it
You're always
into,
so good at this.
Just hit the from beginning so that we
Yeah,
see it, just
yeah.
the slideshow.
There it is. Thank you, everybody. Team. So very happy that the legislative session is now over. And just a few bills that to help we were monitoring that has some a little bit of impact for us. HB 5506, otherwise known as the implementer bill, in section 195, we were able to get in language that prohibits employers from taking certain retaliatory actions against employees under the state's paid family medical leave law. This is to bring it in line with FMLA so that workers have protections for taking paid leave. These aren't terribly sexy, but HB 5269, it's allowing us to continue having our remote and hybrid meetings in place as long as they comply with existing state laws. So we are able to continue to have these meetings and don't have to gather in person, which is very convenient and allows for a lot of participation. And a couple of bills that were passed that we see as opportunities for outreach and engagement. SB 5, which is a pretty large bill that number of items were included, particularly around domestic violence training and protections for victims of domestic violence. In sections 8 and 9, it requires state agencies within available appropriations, along with other employers to provide minimum 1 hour minimum training and education on domestic violence and victim resources, which paid leave is. So we see this as an opportunity to engage more and provide more information on our program. So we're looking forward to working on that. And also SB 2, which a lot of work, kudos to the legislature on a lot of work on the child mental health crisis that we're facing. And this particular bill also provides a wide range of supports for families affected by it. So, and again, another opportunity for us to just discuss, our program and, that they can use paid leave to help handle any health issues with their children. Also, we did some labor outreach, UAW webinar this past week on May 10th at 10:30. And we'll be doing a CSEA webinar on the 23rd, FYI, Eva, if you're not aware of that yet. And the only other thing that I want to share is our map. I'll put the link in our chat just so that you can see. And as you saw from John's report, it really is the same towns that seem to be in the top 10 month after month, but I'll include this link so that you can look a little bit more in detail on that. So as well as you may have also heard that Delaware this past week, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Delaware this past week, the Governor Carney signed into law, and Maryland overrode the veto. So now Maryland joins us, and New Hampshire, they put out an RFP to run their program, and they got 2 respondents. They are not saying who those are. And I think this past week, Minnesota also passed a Republican proposal that is more about an insurance product than necessarily a state-run program. And I'm sure Molly probably has lots of good stuff to add with Better Balance. I just want to give kudos to your organization because you really put out some really great stuff that we see a lot. So just thank you for your work on that, and happy to answer any questions.
Al, is your hand up? Or is
Yes.
that all? Yeah.
No,
Okay.
it's up. First of all, I want to thank the I want to thank you for your work getting that no retaliation for people who use the paid medical leave. I think that's extremely important.
Thanks to our labor chairs, Senator Kushner and Representative Porter, in helping to make that happen. They were good partners. Yeah.
Credit too. And the question I had though is, when does that begin? Is that October 1st as normal, or is it upon, or is it, if you can give me the date?
Yeah, I'll double check on that. I thought it was July 1st, but I will, I'll double check and circle back with you on that, Sal.
Thank you, Jay.
Anyone else? All right. Jacqueline, thank you so much. And we're going to move on to the committee chairs to provide an update on their committee reports. And we'll start with Daryl.
Thank you. So the Policy and Personnel Committee met last week, Tuesday. We discussed the proposed refund policies and also received an update on the private plan audit process that we were able to view today. So that's our update for the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Daryl. Outreach and engagement. Molly, do you have anything to add to Amber's
No, just to
report?
say we met last month, and I think Amber really covered the content well. If there are any questions.
Excellent, thank you. Finance and audit, Holly.
Finance and Audit Committee met last month and discussed the private plan actuarial analysis with WildFig. We also reviewed the draft budget and the update on the refund policy and claims administration, and which we discussed today with the full board. And then Dave, will you please provide the board the financial reports?
Certainly. Thank you, Holly. Hello again, everybody. See how I do with technology. Okay. Everyone can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to go over the month of March this morning. We'll give you a preview of April and our projection of where we think we'll be by the end of the year. So for the month of March, the authority spent $883,000. For the quarter, we had spent almost $3.2 million. That was better than budget for the quarter by $653,000. Fiscal year to date for operations and bond expenditures, we are ahead of budget by $1.6 million. The significant expenditures that we spent the money on for the month of March were $440,000 for salaries and related expenses, $136,000 for the outreach efforts that Amber talked about, $134,000 for the employee contribution system, and $125,000 for the contact center. Cumulatively from inception to date, the authority spent $23 million, just over $10 million in the current fiscal year. Again, we're ahead of budget by about $16.7 million from inception on. The significant categories remain the same as they've been: the employee contribution system, salaries and their related expenses, post-production support, the claims and benefits system, our support teams, and outreach. Those categories are 93% of the spending we've done so far. Focusing on bond funds, as you mentioned before, when we were talking about the budget, we have about over $12.2 million allocated and made available. Through the end of March, we've spent $10.7 million, and we have about another $500,000 in the hopper that we're expecting to spend. So that's a total of about $11.1 million of bond money we expect to spend by the end of the fiscal year, with just over $1 million left for us to use that hasn't been specifically identified with an invoice yet. Moving on to our contribution activity for the month of March, it was a relatively light month for contributions as expected. We got in $860,000. Benefit payments for the month of March were $23 million. Claims benefit expense, Molly, as you would expect, $1.9 million for that. And $637,000 for seed repayments. As you may remember, last month, we had coded a seed repayment on March 1st instead of February 28th. So that's why you see 2 here and none in February, but cumulatively to date, we are right on track. Through the end of March, the contributions have been over $396 million, and the contribution fund itself is at just under $317 million. Just a preview of April. April's expenditures were $778,000. Typical categories: salaries, outreach, contact center. Not really a surprise there. Benefit payments for the month of April were $19.2 million. And the claims admin fee, again, was $1.9 million. Seed repayment, $319,000. And we paid out $314,000 using bond money for work on the DOL appeal system. Contributions as of the end of April were $516.4 million. April is the month when ultimately the contributions are due. They're due at quarter end, but there's an extra month for people to pay without penalty. So that's when they pay. Month of April, actually rather for the those contributions as of April represent the first quarter, and first quarter contributions were $122 billion, which is our best quarter to date. So on the flip side, benefit payments to date through the end of April are $65.3 million. As far as where we think we'll be by the end of the year in terms of operations, we think we'll be ahead of budget by about $2 million. The major categories that we think we're spending better on continue to be grievance adjudication. As we mentioned before, there's not a lot of grievances to be adjudicated. So that volume is lower than expected. Staffing expense is also lower than what we budgeted. We just have less staff now than we thought we would at the end at this time during the year. And and temps, we're using less temps than we thought, and we're actually using some of the bond money for temps because the temps are doing development work, as you may remember. The contributions also expect to be ahead of budget by the end of the year. We think we're going to be about $232.5 million by June 30. The contribution number we're projecting to be about $412 million. The benefit payments, we're still using what the actuaries provided, about $250.5 million. Although as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year, we are revisiting that assumption because as it seems as we get closer, it seems unlikely that we'll have enough volume in the next couple of months to sustain that number. So we're going to be revisiting that assumption. But for now, that's where we stand, just to be on the conservative side. That's where we are in terms of financial activity. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dave, for that presentation. Okay, moving right along, is there any new business? Any old business? Okay, we're all going to get 15 minutes back in our day. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, everyone, have a wonderful rest of the week. The motion carries. It is 10:46. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank
Bye, everybody.
you.
Have a great rest of the week. End.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.